Today, during the film or after the film, I hope you will have some questions for me. You can type them in the box at the bottom, Q&A. If you cannot see it, move your mouse and it should appear. So, because we'll give you a little bit more time that the film lasts to watch it, you can stop during the film. If there is a scene you want to ask about, you can write it here, because you're not going to close that window. You just leave it open, go to the link to watch the film, and then during the film, yeah, you can ask questions, or you can ask them and type them after the film is finished and you come back. This extra time to watch the film is also because you might miss a subtitle or something like that. I know some people are not used to subtitles. So you can always go back a little bit and watch the scene again, or stop it to be able to read the subtitles and then move on. So hopefully you will have enough time to watch it and then come back here straight at 3 p.m. Eastern time, which will be in around hour and 40 minutes. Yeah, we'll give you 1 hour and 50 minutes, sorry, because the film is 1 hour 43 minutes. So yeah, we're gonna give you 1 hour and 50 minutes. So that's one thing. So that's when you have questions during our event. Now, if you have any questions about either any of the films or the retrospective in general, or the subject of my research, you can email me. And now in chat, my email will appear. You can copy it right now, because after we finish this event, which is our last, it will disappear. So yeah, feel free to email me about anything. I'll be more than happy to reply, probably on Monday, not necessarily today after it's finished. Another thing I have to mention is our US license for those films. So if you are outside the US and you are a Polish speaker, you can easily find them on YouTube or anywhere else online. And also I've sent to some of you the links because you asked me to do so. If any of you still wants to watch a film that you've missed, you can still do it. We have the license till the end of the retrospective, which is obviously today. And I cannot tell you exactly what time the passwords will be changed, but you can still try. You know, if you email me and ask me for the links, I will send them to you right away. And then, especially, I believe that if you open the links, that even if the password will be changed, you will be still able to watch them today at least. And maybe they won't change it until Monday. So this way, but we had an agreement that Saturday, today, is the last day that you can watch them. But I unfortunately cannot give you the exact time they will stop working. But this is the last day, the last call, the last possibility to see them. Okay, and then, yeah, you got my email. Today's film is called King Size. It's just spelled in a Polish way. So when you will see it on the screen, when the film starts, it will be spelled a little bit differently. We spell especially vowels in a different way than in English, but the sense is the same because the word comes from English. Now, why is the title King Size? Because it talks about two worlds. One of dwarfs, and that will be the little people, and then very little, like the ones from fairy tales. You know, we have a lot of fairy tales about dwarfs who help you. They're usually friendly, and they usually do jobs for you. They used to do jobs for you when you were asleep. So you would wake up and some things that had to be done were already done. So that's the beliefs in old Poland was that those dwarfs are friendly for us. So there is the world of the dwarfs. It's called Dwarfland because it's full of dwarfs in which they live. And then there is the world of big people, or let's say tall people. And that is the king size, as they call it. And the world of king size is where they all want to go. Not all of them, as you will see, and you will see who will and why. Yeah, and we will talk a little bit more about the film itself after it's finished. This film is by Juliusz Machulski. I mentioned a little bit about him yesterday already because we watched his Sex Mission. He had a little short adventure with Hollywood where they wanted to make remake of Sex Mission and also hire him to make the next film. So he proposed them somewhere which was called How Much the Trojan Horse Weighs. Unfortunately, he didn't find a producer in the end who would be happy to do it. And he did it himself years later in Poland. He also proposed a script of a film that in the end became Déjà Vu. That's the title of the film, but it was made with Mosfilm in Moscow instead of Hollywood. So that's quite interesting story about the director. This is actually his last film that he made during the communist time. It was released in 1988. And after that, he did other cult films, but they are not talking about the system, or they were not made during those times when you had to fight with the censorship. So we're only showing the two that qualify for our retrospective of cult comedies from communist times. So it has to fulfill those two requirements. He made a great film Va-Bank before, and then Killer after, and lately he was just working in a TV. Now he's kind of retired. Maybe he will come back. He was really a king of comedy and did a lot of good films even after the system changed. And he's our king of comedy right now. So I hope you will enjoy this film. I'm gonna now give you the link. So you just need to click on it. It's in chat. And the password, and those of you who are coming back will recognize that the password is all the same every time. So please go watch the film and come back in exactly 1 hour and 50 minutes for the Q&A. Thank you, enjoy the film. So welcome back, in case you didn't hear me. Please remember that you can ask your questions or comments in either chat or the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. I will start just by reminding you that that was the last film that we showed during our retrospective of Polish cult comedies from communist times. As George Orwell wrote, every joke is a tiny revolution. However, various academics from the field of humor studies disagree whether humor can be a tool of fight with the regime, a form of peaceful protest, or merely a safety valve. According to the relief theory of humor, it can play a therapeutic and cathartic role. And Sigmund Freud believed that it allows people to express forbidden thoughts and therefore is a coping mechanism. In Soviet bloc, the laughter was giving people the feeling of freedom, helped them integrate, and help the bond forming. So that allows them to realize they are not alone, start organizing and fighting the regime. So let me just tell you first why I said yesterday that this is my favorite film. From this film started the whole idea of this research because the film was released in 1988, and that was a time when in Poland we had something for a while called Orange Alternative, Pomarańczowa Alternatywa, in the city of Wrocław in the south. And that was something new in a sense that some people a little bit desperate after the introduction of the martial law, when the spirit of solidarity was broken and people, you know, didn't have much hope. One man called the Major, he decided that he's going to start fighting the system with humor. So what he started first by writing some articles in a second circulation underground newspaper, and then starting happening. So that was beginning of the 1980s. In 1982, he started to paint dwarfs. So that was his idea, And the color of orange was also symbolic for the orange alternative, because the fight back then was between the red communism and the yellow church, yellow because of the color of the flag of Pope, Polish Pope. So they decided that those two colors together make orange, yellow, and red. And they didn't want to go on either the communist side nor the church side. They were looking for a third way of fight. Now, the church was also representing the post-solidarity, underground solidarity circles as well, because the church was very helpful to the solidarity movement that was delegalized during the martial law in 1981. So the Orange Alternative started to do happenings in 1985, and the way they would fight the regime was by making fun of it in a way. And that was confusing for militiamen, because you know, the happenings were them, Orange Alternative members, for example, giving people toilet paper, which was a rare thing, very hard to buy. So they would buy a lot of it, and then they would go to the middle of the downtown of the city of Wrocław, and they would just give it to people. Or they would celebrate the anniversary of the revolution in 1970. And they would dress in red, they would have a tank made of paper, and they would just make fun kind of those Russian or communism symbols, but in a way that the militia was confused and didn't know what to do, because, you know, they were saying, yeah, we are, you know, we are commemorating the anniversary of the Great Revolution. So the militia kind of knew they are making fun of it, but how can you prove it? You know, you're gonna stop people because they are celebrating the anniversary of the revolution. That doesn't sound good or look good on the paper. Later, they would also start to dress as dwarfs, and the dwarfs start appearing on the walls. The pictures of dwarfs start appearing from 1982. Whenever a solidarity, underground solidarity member would write a slogan such as there is no freedom without solidarity, for example, right? Then militia job would be to go around the city, find those slogans and paint them black or any other color so people couldn't see them. And then Orange Alternative would step in at night and paint a dwarf on the paint that militia left over the slogan. So it was like a game in a way. And the idea of dwarfs was theirs. We don't really know exactly where it came from, but it was later became very popular, and those happenings started to happen in other cities like Łódź and Warsaw, even though there was no internet back then. But you know, underground solidarity movements and young people, they were just traveling across the country and would just pass the message one to the other. So the most famous happening happened in 1987, and that was that was on June 1st, 1988. It was called Revolution of the Dwarfs. So 1st of June is the day of children in Poland. Like, we celebrate children, like you have Mother's Day, Father's Day, you have Child's Day. And usually on that day, the whole family would go to the city center, and children would get ice cream, or, you know, they would get some kind of treat. So what the Orange Alternative did that day was dressing as dwarfs and playing, jumping, just like in this film, they are jumping a lot, right? Because that's what dwarfs do. They are children-like. So they kind of put those two things together, children, dwarfs, you know, fairy tales for children. And there would be a lot of people, and they would be dressed in orange. And poor militia, again, was confused, because, you know, how are you gonna arrest somebody because he's dressed as a dwarf? You know, it's ridiculous. So they were ridiculing them, the militia, in that way, in a way. And then it was also that the militia didn't know who was part of the organizers of the happening and who were just normal, regular people passing by. If somebody by accident was wearing something orange, they could arrest him just because of that. So this movement became famous in 1987. Even abroad, they started to write about him. In America, there was an article that made them famous. So this, the biggest happening I mentioned again was June 1st, 1988. And the film, this film, King Size, was released on the 2nd of May of the same year, which means it was just a month earlier. Now, I had a chance to ask the director, Juliusz Machulski, if he was inspired by the movement in any way, because those dwarfs obviously symbolize the freedom or fight for freedom in a way. So the idea might have come from the orange alternative. He said that no, he wasn't inspired, he wasn't really aware much, or even he was aware, you know, he doesn't think, maybe it was subconscious, but he said he was not inspired by it. On the other hand, though, the happening kind of assimilated things from the film, because in the film we have this sentence that appears a few times: small is beautiful. And those people who took part in that happening, they dressed similar to those people in the film, dwarfs, and they would shout, small is beautiful, right? I was one of the slogans, or write it on the walls. So it was in the way like incorporated. And this way, you know, we can see that humor can become a tool of fight against the regime. So this film is about like micro-totalitarian system in a way. In the song that is sang in that film, there are words that say, when you don't have enough for everybody, make people smaller and there will be enough. So it's talking about making people little or belittle people. It kind of has double meaning. Because, you know, on one hand, here symbolically, it would be making people little literally, but belittling people, making them feel inferior, was the way that communism was working on the mentality. And also this film shows that in totalitarian system, individuals are not important. When one of the dwarfs says, you know, there should be king size for everybody to choose, who wants to be a dwarf can be a dwarf, who wants to join the world of the big people can do just that. It shouldn't be just for the chosen ones. Especially we find out at the beginning that king size is treated like a vacation place for people who are like party members who did something for the country, for the system. And even the colonel, the evil colonel played by the same actor, Jerzy Sztur, who was playing Max yesterday in Sex Mission, he goes there sometimes. Why he goes there? You know, just to have fun. There are women in the king size world, and there are no women dwarfs, because dwarfs are only male. So he's using the opportunity to go to that world from time to time. And obviously the meaning of those two worlds is that Trowland, the, you know, draft, oh, what's the word again? Drows, right? That's kind of symbolizing this totalitarian system of the Eastern countries, USSR and all the Soviet bloc. And then the king size symbolizes the West and America, the Western world. And obviously to go to the West, you needed to be worthy, because you couldn't just go whenever you wanted. As we know from the other films that we watched so far, you wouldn't have a passport at home. It would be something you have to apply for each time you want to go abroad. And then after you come back, you have to give it back. So it was regulated. Therefore, we can see that in this film, it's about this dream, king size for everyone, right? Which means you should be able to choose, you shouldn't be forced to live in the Drowland with all the other dwarfs. And that's exactly what happened when the system changed. We got passports, we could choose. Some Polish people left, start living in other countries of the European Union or you know, somewhere else. And then some decided to stay, and then also some of the ones who left came back. So we have the freedom now. And the fact that you can have your passport at home and go wherever you want, anywhere you want, it's really a great feeling, and it's really like this feeling of freedom symbol. So here it's symbolized by the king size, the formula that helps you become big, which was a top secret of the system of the government. And then the people who try to go to king size and stay there are called dissidents. So they are representing political prisoners. Adam, who the chemist who found the formula himself at the very beginning, he's punished like that. So here we have a way of you know, looking at the political prisoners, and also it could symbolize the gulags and all of those and tortures, because he's tortured, you know, and he's in prison. So he is symbolizing all the dissidents of the Eastern system, communist system. Now, the ending is quite interesting of that film because, well, it was supposed to be a happy ending, right? First of all, let me mention that when they walk through the restaurant car, there are different people from the film sitting there that we've seen. At the very end, the last gentleman that we look at, and he put his head up, that's the director. That's Juliusz Machulski, so it's his little small cameo in his own film. Now, one of the older dwarfs who are helping Olo to go back to the Drowland is played by director's father, Jan Machulski. Now, he and the other agent, so those two who go with him for the first time, and they both die on the way, one because of the battery, an electroshock, and the other one because of the rat trap or mouse trap. And in this film, they are called Kwintko and Kramerko, which is an internal joke, because they were both playing in a debut film by Machulski called Vabank, and one was called Kwinto, the other one was called Kramer. So by adding those endings, Kramerko and Kwintko, they are just made, it's like a way of making diminutive of words, making them smaller, cuter, nicer, because that obviously works well with the names for dwarfs, right? Dwarfs' names are very specific. So it's like an internal joke, because people who knew Vabank, and practically everyone who watched King Size would know that film. So they knew that those two actors retake kind of their roles and have those names. So that's like a kind of meta joke between the different films of the same director. So let's go back to the ending again. The ending is very symbolic as well. So if we decide that the whole Dwarfland symbolizes the East, the USSR communist system countries, and the king size symbolizes the West, then how come that in the end they realize that they are again in like a small you know, world, and they are dwarfs again for another like dimension in a way. It's a little bit like the Gulliver's adventures, when he meets smaller people and bigger people, right? So it looks like king size was in the middle in now, kind of like, because you have smaller ones, dwarfs, and then bigger ones, the boy who is playing with the train. But that's not even the end, because at the very end, we see that this is all watched by us through a keyhole. So obviously we can understand the ending symbolically any way we like. I would wonder if you have any ideas why the director finished that way, what can it symbolize. In my opinion, it's just him trying to say, this is almost the end of the system. You know, he's been abroad already, he's been to the West, he's been to king size, he knows what it looks like. And I think he's trying to say that maybe it's not just about the system. If you are a believer, that maybe this next kind of world in which they are small again and there's something bigger might be symbolized by heaven, you know, or maybe it's just a different system completely that we can't even think of yet. So it's quite symbolic, and I like that about that film, you know, that there is no kind of answer at the end. Everybody can decide for themselves. Let me see. We do have a question here. Was Polo Cocktail the real-life Polish equivalent of Coca-Cola, or was it a totally fictitious drink made up for the film? Now, as far as I remember, there was something called Polo Cocktail, but there were different kind of fake Coca-Colas, drinks, like there are now, right? And then the whole idea, that's obviously another kind of symbol, right? Because Coca-Cola was a symbol of the West. Coca-Cola was the symbol of the democratic countries, free countries outside the communist bloc. So that was another kind of joke in a way, because the director decided to use this thing that is obviously based on Coca-Cola called Polo Cocktail. And the polo part kind of shows that it's the Polish version of it, right? So again, we could say that it's the whole idea of somebody breaking the formula and start making their own Polo Cocktail, just like Adaś got his own formula of the king size. Now, king size has a lot of meanings. King size is the place, right? But they also called I've got king size, he says, and he means the formula, the liquid that helps you become big. So I believe there was a time. Actually, I do think, now that I think of it, I remember, I believe we could Google it in a minute, but I believe that it was invented for the film, and after the film, somebody started to produce it because it was so popular. Yes, I think that was the case, but we can check it in a minute. So yeah, because of the film being, so again, just like the Orange Alternative took over one of the slogans from the film that everybody has seen by then, right? Because it was a very popular film, it was a hit film. So when the people saw it a month earlier or during that month, when the happening of Orange Alternative with dwarfs started, they might have even thought it was connected with the film in a way. They might not know, because remember those happenings were like flash mobs in a way, right? So there was a group of people who knew what they were doing, they had an idea, and then there would be passers-by who would be just kind of dragged into it and joining just for fun. You know, I mean, they were just playing, and this way, those people, as I mentioned, the spirit was broken in the 80s a little bit. The economy was getting worse and worse. The solidarity, which was the hope for the future, was delegalized. So the life was quite gray, and they brought some color in it, some humor. So people would join them just, you know, to kind of forget for a moment about the gray life that they had with all the shortings and problems. There is a lot of jokes of communism reality in that film. The fact that they had a housing problem, just like Poland, and we know about those housing problems from other films. Here the talk that some of them even get their own draw if they wait long enough, right? So it seems like a similar way of the system is working the same way. And also there's a lot of other jokes that are making fun of the system. Again, it's kind of hidden. It's the costume is used to not to talk specifically about the reality of Poland, like straightforward, but the audience knows. So it's not even as much Aesopian language, so it's a costume, so-called costume in a film used to pass this message. So everybody who would watch the film would know that, you know, who's being made fun of in that film. So yeah, that was about the Polo Cocta. Do we have any questions in the chat? There is just an observation. Oh, somebody wrote it. Oh, similar question. Did they still have censors? Did Machulski face issues from censors? Okay, so yes, the censorship was still existing. It was the end on the 80s, though. Just 1 year later, a little bit over, well, actually, no, it was May, June, yeah, a little bit over a year later, the system has collapsed. So, and I mentioned before a few times, it was getting weaker and weaker with every decade. So by that time, I think this sense of senseless and, you know, broken spirit, as I call it, or, you know, the gray reality around was not only visible and felt by the Solidarity people, but also by the party members. You know, everything was going badly. That's why they gave the power away in the end and agreed for the first free elections. So yes, the whole system was still working, but it was on its last legs, both economically, because this is the time when we have those empty stores with almost nothing to buy left that you might have seen on your news back then at the 80s. And also mentally, so the censors, yes, that still existed. But again, remember, I think I mentioned that before. The censors would get like a booklet with things said, like you cannot make fun of, you know, I don't know, let's say party members from Poland or other countries. You cannot make fun of the system. You cannot use those words, for example. So they were quite specific. Now, when there was something that was outside the box like this, there was not much they could do, or it was an excuse maybe for some of them as well not to do, because, you know, nobody said this is Poland in the film, right? Nobody said this is about the system. It was all kind of hidden. It was just this agreement between the filmmakers and the public that developed over the years, that everybody knew how it will be taken. But when Machulski was making the film, he said, well, I'm just doing, you know, a comedy about wars. That's it, right? They could read the script and there would be nothing there really. He surely didn't say I'm making a film for children, because we could see there was still some nudity in it. I don't think that was specifically for children. So yeah, it was just, you know, that's why he was using the costume. And he did in everything, in Vabank, even though it wasn't political film, it was happening between the wars. He didn't want to make films happening in the current time. That's what he was doing with all of his films. So then Sex Mission, science fiction, King Size, fairy tale, even Deja Vu that he finished right after the system changed. It was, you know, before the Second World War. So it's only after the system changed in the 90s that he started to make current films without people being dressed as, you know, either dwarves or as yesterday in Sex Mission, you know, people of the future. So that was the time when he finally would start to make jokes of the reality. But back then in the 90s, he already could. And he was very good at that, because some filmmakers, when the system changed, they completely lost the, you know, the only way they could communicate with the public was by using this Aesopian language. So now, before they were not allowed to say a lot of things. Now they were allowed to say anything, and they didn't know what to say. Even Wajda, the master of Polish cinema, said that he doesn't really know his public anymore, and he doesn't know what they want. Before it was all simple, you know, it was very straightforward. So Machulski was very good at that, because yeah, the rest of his films are happening here and now. and they are still very funny. Two killers, super production, making fun of the film industry, very funny, and he doesn't have to hide anymore. So he proved himself in both systems. And also, you know, the first system would give you the money to make a film, and the second one you would have to get it. And he actually became a producer. He was producing other people's films, and he was the head of one of the film studios. So yeah, he didn't have much problems with the censors because of that. Okay, let me see, there was a jump here in the chat. For your research project, are you able to interview former members of the censorship board about how they approach satires like this week's films? Unfortunately, no, that wouldn't be very simple, because first of all, we would have to find out who they were, and they wouldn't probably want to talk. Being a censor was not something you would tell people around, right? Being proud of. That wasn't a job you would be proud of. We have a very good film about censors that was made at the end of the 80s as well, Escape from the Cinema, Freedom Cinema. The name of the cinema is Freedom, and it's about a censor and the life of a censor when the system is changing. So yeah, they were usually educated people, well-read. They were, you know, not just whoever. They could finish Polish language studies, for example, or something similar, and then be hired by the system. But at the end of the system in 1989, I think a lot of people was kind of desperate, and even the censors, they wouldn't be so, that's why this film as well, you know, was not really cut, because they wouldn't, I don't want to say care anymore, but yeah, they wouldn't be so eager to do their job. If there was nothing that was obvious they should take off, then they wouldn't. So the times has changed, comparing to Machulski, Barea films. So is there any other question about king size? Because I also wanted to talk a little bit about all of those films, and we just start talking about the research project that I'm doing. So the films that we have shown you, all of them all together, if you look at them, I believe that they kind of show that you should just be the good person. No matter the system, no matter the consequences, you should just behave the way, you know, that you do things you believe in, and that you can look yourself in the mirror. It was something that our great poet Zbigniew Herbert was writing about. There was a poem in which he says, walk upright among people on their knees. So don't go down on your knees, stay up, and, you know, don't be ashamed of what you do. So always do the right thing. So Barea was kind of trying to show that in Mish, I believe, in Teddy Bear, the last one he did. Barea is also very interesting as well. We showed 4 of his films. There's more that we could show. They were the most concentrated on the satire of the system. But he also, as I mentioned before, made 2 TV series in the 80s. And I believe that we could compare him to Krzysztof Kieślowski, very famous Polish filmmakers who got famous in the West thanks to his 10 episodes TV series, 10 Commandments, or the Decalogue. And Barea made a TV series as well called 4 Alternatives. It was the name of the street, Alternative Street number 4, which is also funny because you can obviously only have 2 alternatives, but here they were joking that, you know, in communism you have 4 alternatives, and it's kind of like west, east, north, west, east, north, south, right? And this film is also, just like the Decalogue, happening in one apartment block in one of the new quarters of Warsaw, and we look at the life of different people. So the idea was very similar. And Kieślowski was appreciated. Barea wasn't during his life. He died before the system changed in 1987. I think we only started to appreciate him after. And this film is as important, this TV series is as important as the Decalogue, because the Decalogue, each episode would be about one of the 10 commandments, and it would put the protagonist of the film in a hard, difficult situation, and they would have to choose what to do. You know, it wasn't even religious as much as more. It was more about morality, because there was this feeling at the end of the 80s that the morality is kind of dying. You know, people are just dealing and willing just to survive, and nobody cares about the right thing to do anymore. So do the right thing is the main idea of that film. And also Kieślowski was kind of asking questions. You know, he doesn't want to give the answers. He was just asking what would you do? He was not the one who would tell people what he thinks they should do. Now Barea in the Alternatives 4, on the other hand, he showed a block of people, apartment block, when people lived in different flats, and it was a spectrum of the whole society, Polish society, because those apartments were given, and again, I mentioned that before, to intelligentsia members, you know, workers, peasants, everybody. They would all live in one place. There was even a party member, high rank, who would live there kind of by accident. And then we have the man who's taking care of the whole building. His job is to clean around, you know, he's like a concierge kind of person. But all those people, they would usually get the apartment, but their job was to be eyes and ears of the secret police, you know, like Polish KGB, let's say, something like that. So in this film, in this TV series, over more than 10 episodes, we see how he is checking of the tenants. He's actually opening their correspondence and then reads it and then puts back, you know, you do it over a hot steam, so you can, you know, they can see that he opened and read it. So he knows everything about them, and then he's playing kind of, he is using them one against the other. He's forcing one to spy on the rest of them. And, you know, he is really kind of putting them against each other. And it works well for him until at the end, the tenants get together in secret, obviously. He doesn't know about that. And at the end, they rebel against him. And in a way they win, because he's taken away, somebody else is put at the job, but at the very, very end, they find out that he was just promoted, because that was what's happening. Whenever, as we mentioned before, the profession of some people was to be a director of something, and if they didn't work in one place, they would be transferred to another one, usually higher with better pay. You know, that was the punishment, let's say, in a way, right? Which was really just making them promoted. So this film, this TV series shows the thing that happened really in Poland, because there were always strikes and rebellions against the system from the moment that, you know, the Second World War started, further with partisans, and then we had fights on the street with police in 1956, in the 70s, in 80s. But the thing was that it was always either the workers would, you know, strike, or the students, so intelligentsia, and they didn't come together. Like when ones did, the other ones were just looking, then the other way around, you know, oh, you didn't go with us, so we're not going with you. And until at the end, in 70s, there was something called KOR organized, which was the intelligentsia kind of got involved into unions, workers' union, and they helped, you know, lawyers, for example, would gratis for free help people who were arrested, things like that. So they finally came together, and that's when they won. That's when the Solidarity was organized, and the Carnival of Solidarity, the you know, few months of freedom happened. So it was kind of symbolic as well. And we find out after Bareja's death that he was actually himself doing a lot for the solidarity. He was writing in one of the underground newspapers, and also he brought a photocopier from abroad. He actually let them use the underground printing kind of solidarity company. He let them use his basement, and they would photocopy forbidden books or newspapers. So the newspaper he was writing for was called Strachy na Lachy. I think it's impossible to translate really. But that brings me back to the Orange Alternative. They also started with this kind of joking newspaper, and we did have humor, because obviously solidarity was serious, right? They were using slogans, and then Orange Alternative was kind of making fun of both sides, both the solidarity, which they, as younger people, thought is like boring, and they would make fun of the party slogans as well. And they would use humor to make fun really of both, but it was obvious which side they are on. And Solidarity was actually looking at them with sympathy, so they kind of collaborated. It was just kind of like a fun thing to do, to fight with the system, with the absurdity. Especially the system was absurd, right? It's very often make no sense. It was very surreal to live in that reality. And that's what we've seen, especially in Barea's films, I think, that it wasn't supposed to work. And it wasn't really working, but somehow it dragged on for a long time. So this, the comedies and the jokes, they were, and the Orange Alternative was using the jokes and the humor to exactly kind of make fun of that reality. And it was working, because the happenings were really big. And in the time when people were kind of tired of politics, they didn't really want to get involved anymore, because, as I said, they were kind of crushed, their hopes were crushed. There was a time, when nobody wanted to get involved anymore, almost nobody. And they kind of organized people, gave them kind of new hope maybe, but mobilized them to do something again. As fun, just as those happenings were really fun. And yeah, there are those stories, legends about that movement. I actually have, if you are interested in that subject, I have a link that I'm going to put here again in the chat, and that is in English. It's called the Orange Alternative Museum, and you can read there about them and about the happenings that they've been doing. There's a lot of them. There are some pictures, and it will give you the idea of how they were working. So there are kind of proof that humor can be used against the regime. And that gave me the idea that maybe those films as well, were part of it, because people would go to cinema, they would laugh together, they would understand each other above those censors' heads, and then they would realize they are not alone, and that would help them to organize, form bonds, and start, integrate and fight the system. Do we have any more questions? This is our last call for a question. If not, I will just allow myself, because this is our last meeting of the retrospective, maybe I'll just go a little bit personal and tell you that something I did say before, kind of the change of the system maybe didn't resolve all our problems, but surely there was a difference. We could feel that wind of freedom. It was an amazing feeling. So yeah, there was really a feeling of winning something, the fight that was fought for a long time. And yeah, we are a free country now. So we can, we might have problems, but we can decide ourselves how we want to resolve them. One more question appeared in the meantime in the chat. Will we see more of such events? Well, the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation organize a lot of different events. You can find information about them on the website. Maybe I should put the link to the website here. And then you can have a look if this is the first time that you are join one of the events. Okay, so it will appear in chat right now. And please, if you're interested, please copy those links because they will disappear the moment we will stop the event. Please also copy my email, and let me just put it there again one more time. I will email you as well anyway, so if you don't email me, you will get an email with the survey from me soon. But yeah, if you have any questions, any ideas, you can also contact me. Obviously, this event was supposed to happen in person in Washington, D.C. Because of the COVID-19, we moved it to the online platform. So most of the events before were happening here. Now they are all online. But hopefully, you know, we will be able to meet in cinema again. So depending on where you live in, there might be some film showings in the future, but probably more likely in cinemas in Washington, D.C. One more question, or two questions now appear. Okay, do you have links from previous films? Yes, I do. I will send them to you right now. But the only thing is, as I said, I know they will stop working today. I'm just not sure what time. So let me just write down the name, and I will send you an email right after we finish with the Word document with all the links. So maybe if you decide quickly which ones you want to see, you might be able to just open them and then you know, watch them one by one, and then closing them, and then probably they will stop working. So the one other question is, do you know where we can find these films after the retrospective ends? Okay, so we bought the license for the week for the retrospective from Polish authorities. The WFDF, which is the Polish film studio, has the rights to all of them. Some of them are on DVDs or Blu-rays. You can buy them on Amazon, mpcon.pl or eBay. You just should check if they have English subtitles, unless you are a Polish speaker. If you're a Polish speaker, you can actually quite easily find them on YouTube. There is a website called cda.pl, and they are there as well. But if you need the subtitles, then yes, that's a little bit harder. Not all of them have been released with English subtitles. So we made an effort to make sure we got the subtitles for all of them to show them to you. So this was quite a rare occasion, really, to watch those films. You were one of the lucky ones who had a chance to watch them. So yeah, today, unfortunately, was the last day of our retrospective. I would like to thank you all very much for joining me in that journey. I am very grateful I was able to take it with you. And I wish you a very nice rest of the day and the weekend. Thank you very much. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.